Hi, everyone. Welcome to part two of the tour guide training, the Federated States of Micronesia and the state of Kosrae for the UNESCO participation program. In this particular part, we'll be looking at Kosraean and Mahkontowe Conservation Area culture, history, and geography. So the summaries and key messages here are what we're going for in this particular part. And there's quite a bit here. The considerations are important overall because they allow us to provide visitors to Kosrae with important parts of Kosraean culture, history, and geography. Many visitors, of course, enjoy learning about new places and people, as well as seeing the natural beauty. Since the hikes are in the Mahkontowe Conservation Area, the emphasis should be on sharing with visitors the particular history, archaeology, and geography that they will see on their hikes. You should also talk about life on Kosrae, and if you would like, to include a few personal details as well. Again, since there's a lot of information in this and other sections, you're ultimately going to adjust what you share with visitors based on their own interests as well as your own knowledge and interests. If all the visitors in the group that you are leading are really into archaeology, well, you're going to share mostly about archaeology. If they're really into the natural history, environment, the plants, the animals, the ecosystem, potentially even the geology, then you'll share more about that. Again, you want to tailor the interest to the group as a whole. If you've got interest across the board, then you're going to share a bit about each. But of course, keep yourself available during the tour if anyone has questions to follow up and ask you more about a particular aspect. And of course, not everybody's going to know everything, and it's completely fine to say, I don't know that, but I will find that out. Even better still, if you can get back to that visitor while they're still on Kosrae or send the information to them somehow. So an overview here, we're going to look at the state of Kosrae overall in the context of Federated States of Micronesia. We'll be looking at legislative priorities, some of the work of the Historic Preservation Office that helped to set up the Mahkontowe Conservation Area and how that area has been utilized. We'll talk about the cultural history of Mahkontowe, the development of MCA, hikes within MCA, and then I'll go through some of the various maps that have been used in a variety of reports through Kirma. And of course, you can pause the recording at any point in time if you want to spend a little bit more time and take additional notes from what I'm sharing. So the Federated States of Micronesia and Kosrae broadly. In FSM, the gross domestic product value of all the goods and services sold in a given year is $331 million. This translates to a per capita income of $3,200 in Micronesia as a whole, and specifically for Kosrae, $2,474. In terms of Kosrae specific, early time period or many years back, generations ago, when the Japanese occupied Federated States of Micronesia, they referred to Micronesia as the South Seas. Now, it was south in relation to them, and this is also a common misconception of visitors from North America. We all have a map, but somehow many people don't recognize that it's actually north latitude, 5.3 degrees north latitude. The island's 111 square kilometers, and a good chunk of that, of course, is the Mahkontowe Conservation Area, with 6,600 people practicing in a mixed subsistence economy, so cash income in addition to subsistence activities to make a living, with broad participation in subsistence practices, from gathering, working around the household, pigs, other animals, and then also upland, potentially hunting as well as fishing activities. Some legal aspects that are important to keep in mind from the Kosrae State Constitution. The centrality or the importance of the environment is really apparent if you look at the Kosraean Constitution. Right in the first section here, a person has the right to a healthful, clean, and stable environment. So while providing for the orderly development and use of natural resources, the state government shall by law protect the state's environment, ecology, natural resources, from impairment in the public interest. So it's this idea, it's a very, following Gifford Pinchot that we'll talk about in a later section, is a very utilitarian way of looking at the environment without diminishing the environment and attempting to balance out sometimes competing interests in terms of development and preservation of areas. And of course, this is very, very difficult to do, and we see many examples of how difficult it is in a variety of states around the globe. Section 3 of the Kosrae State Constitution: the use of real property shall in the public interest be regulated by law to assure public health, community well-being, orderly and economical use of land, preservation of places of cultural or historic value, and island beauty. So again, this idea that there are going to be regulations in place for parcels in order to protect the public interest. And of course, we see this in many countries across the globe, this idea that you can do certain things with your property, but potentially not others that are going to be very detrimental to your neighbors or your community. Section 6 of the Kosrae State Constitution notes that rivers and streams designated by law are public property, so the use of which by the state government shall regulate by law in the public interest. So the protection of the waterways, the buffer zone around the waterways that of course originate within the MCA and then flow all the way down into the ocean on Kosrae, so that that area is protected all the way through and regulated. A key aspect of law that is important for the Mahkontowe Conservation Area is Title 19, which deals with the protection and management of the environment as well as Protected Areas Act. This mandates a review process for the establishment of a protected area through consultation with communities and multiple government agencies. The legislature may approve an act by an area proposed within the system. So how is this done for MCA? So there's a lot of community development here, a lot of public outreach presentations that occurred in 2017 and 2018. There was mayors, governor, lieutenant governor were in attendance on that December 14th meeting. And then the proposals were delivered also to government officials and agencies throughout 2017 and 2018. So really a lot of information was shared with the public as a whole and with government officials and agencies. The Kosrae Historic Preservation Office in Kirma have been focusing on this idea of cultural sovereignty through heritage conservation. So conservation can refer to a number of different things. Gifford Pinchot's idea that we'll talk about in a later section notes the conservation of natural resources as an end goal in and of itself towards sustainability. But we might also think about conservation is a restoring or returning to health overall and well-being. So this can be done through a variety of different outreach and programs, which include oral history projects, museum exhibits, cultural impact assessments, environmental impact assessments, and environmental conservation of cultural landscapes. Many of the projects in the Kosrae State Historic Preservation Office, which is an excellent resource for tour guides that want to learn more about the cultural and natural history as well as Kirma, to go to, and to talk with individuals that have worked on many of these projects over time. And so some of the projects over the past 6 years or so have included ethnography programs, traditional trails program, ethnozoology, subsistence work, and ethnobotany. Also, it has included youth projects, including an ethnographic field school and the navigation club, and then hikes for history. So, these are ways that help to inform the development and also utilize the MCA in a variety of different ways. And so when we're talking about the MCA, of course, there's why is it called the Mahkontowe Conservation Area? It's you recognize the silhouette on the horizon from the capital, and you look at that and you're like, oh, that's the Sleeping Lady. And of course, Kosrae has been known historically as the island of Sleeping Lady. It is also, and more recently, there have been discussions about Mahkontowe. And of course, there are many different stories and oral histories and legends that help to inform how the island of Kosrae was viewed historically by ancestors on Kosrae. So one of the stories collected through Historic Preservation Office work was the island of Sleeping Lady, or Mahkontowe. And this is based on work to date. In the story, Mahkontowe was the daughter of Lot, a whale that formed Lelu Island, and she rode the whale trying to escape. But the king essentially cast a spell on the whale, which made her come back to Kosrae. The whale passed on, leaving her daughter in sadness, leading to her fall asleep in the mountains of Kosrae. So the outline of the silhouette of the Sleeping Lady. There are many legends in the stories of the 4 municipalities. The stories began around the time of the missionaries. You can see some of the further information here on the municipalities. Islands across Micronesia can trace their clan genealogies to Kosrae or Chow, referring to a time of voluntary and mutual exchange. So Mahkontowe, you might relate some of the stories of Mahkontowe or the Sleeping Lady, and of course that's something that's really clear and visible, right, to visitors. If you start your tour in a location that gives you this sort of view, you might gather the people that you're leading on a hike, and then talk a little bit about the Sleeping Lady and Mahkontowe overall. You might also point out the specific peaks as they're named, so yeah, this is a nice. You might do a screenshot here or find this in one of the other reports. And again, many of these images come from KIRMA or HPO and the folks that have worked at those agencies, or that agency for quite a bit of time. So you might point out particular peaks, and you might also say things like, well, today we're going to be hiking up this valley, and you might point out to the visitors where that is. You might even have it on a map that you can show them. And then if you have a topographic map, you can also potentially show them that. So some of the hikes within the MCA or routes are here, and of course, if they're more traveled, the maintenance and records about those will be better kept, and you'll be more knowledgeable. But of course, touch base with other guides as well as state agencies and tour operators to get a sense of current trail conditions. And of course, be mindful of things like the weather as well. Just another image here from towards the top. You can also be pointing out some of these features as you come to various points along the hike. So just being able to orient yourself in space. So things like a topographic map are helpful, or going out with an experienced guide who can point out some of the peaks and valleys as well as water features would be helpful. And so again, there's a lot going on within the MCA in terms of these routes. Some of these are quite challenging. And so again, just being aware of who is on the hike with you, some cultural features and natural features that you can point out to individuals as well. The area by municipality, so you can talk a little bit about that. And you can see the Mahkontowe boundary in relation to the Japanese line. And so you might talk also a little bit about some of the history of the Japanese line, some of the stories of Japanese time on Kosrae, and what that meant for Kosraeans. And maybe also talk about some of the legacy of that. Some of the buildings, materials dating to back to at the latest stage, World War II, with the arrival of the U.S. And so you can talk about basically how the landscape was controlled and managed by the Japanese, maybe in a quite a bit different way than it has been since, or it was before. So just some talking points here with that. So the boundaries of the MCA here in relation to the Japanese line and the buffer zone around the MCA. So the buffer zone and the transition zone, these become important in the management of a conservation area in order to ensure that the area itself is not disturbed in any type of way. One of the key things to point out, and one of the things that will become really apparent to your guests as you're hiking through the MCA, if you look at the topography and the slopes within the MCA, it makes for quite challenging hikes. And of course, there are regulations that are associated with development of particular slopes, and that particular slopes under regulation, which would go to the Constitution in terms of preservation of the environment, preservation and stability of the slopes, of course, meaning that you are going to better preserve the waterways. When you preserve the waterways, again, you'll preserve the reef better, and we'll talk about that in the next section. So a lot of this land in the Mahkontowe Conservation Area could not be developed even if the MCA did not exist. You might also talk a little bit more broadly about some of the different types of vegetations and ecosystems within Kosrae, and you might talk a little bit about how these work in relation to one another, and where you find these particular things. So of course, elevation makes a difference here, particularly we're talking about the montane cloud forest. And again, we'll see this in a later section as an area of biological significance. The watersheds, again, we noted that the MCA occupies the highest points, some of the highest points of the island. And of course, this is essential for preservation of and avoiding siltation of particular waterways and streams. So the protection of MCA is equivalent to the protection of these watersheds and the various services that they provide. You can see some of the other features on Kosrae. And again, you can use any of these to orient your visitors to MCA and to MCA and Kosrae as a whole. Visitors really do enjoy learning about this, and the more ways that you can do that for visitors, you might show them, if you can get a color map, you might show them some of these features, and you might laminate that because, of course, with the humidity and the water and whatnot, it can be damaged quite easily. So in this particular part, we looked at quite a bit of information here, and this is just the start of information that this tour guide training is going to provide. And you might start to think about how to incorporate some of these various elements. So we talked about the state of Kosrae in relation to the Federated States and Micronesia overall. We looked at some of the legislative priorities under the Kosrae State Constitution, as well as Title 19 in terms of protection of the natural environment and how that relates to the Mahkontowe Conservation Area. We looked at some of the projects that have been done through KIRMA and HPO to preserve and also educate about the MCA and the natural and cultural history on Kosrae. And of course, those are both excellent resources to you as a tour guide to learn more about the MCA. The story of Mahkontowe, the development of Mahkontowe in terms of the legislative history, some of the various hikes within the MCA and some of the various maps that, of course, you can utilize with your guests as you're sharing more information about Kosrae and FSM, as well as specifically the Mahkontowe Conservation Area. So I'd ask that you pause the film now, or we're just about to end anyway, but take some time to write out your response to the question based on the tour guide training manual. What would you share with a visitor in terms of the culture, history, and geography of Kosrae, and also the Mahkontowe Conservation Area? And of course, you can get a nice base here from this, and it'll help you to retain the information that this screencast and the tour guide training manual discuss. Thank you very much.